Hello there, ICS4C folks. We've got lesson 3.3 on jQuery events, which is I think goes roughly with the fourth set of Code Academy lessons in jQuery. Um, I don't think there was really much of a theme to this lesson, but just to introduce you to more and more cool jQuery stuff. So I've got a Smart Notebook file open here to take the note. Probably you could get away with the word processor. I also should have posted, and if I didn't, I apologize, a zip file called 3.3 jQuery event sample code. And this is the code that I'm going to use through this lesson. And please, make sure you goof around with this code. So stop the video and try the code out, and if you think of something that you'd like to try, see if it works, and then change it back and follow along that way. The one of the biggest things about computer science and the biggest fun things about computer science is you think of something, well, I wonder what happens if I do this, and then you just try that and see what happens. That's one of the best ways to learn computer science. Anyway, so you've got some code. I'm using Notepad++ this time instead of JSBin, and you can use whichever. So here's the note. This is a reminder. Here's some new events, and I don't even think this is a new one. Remember, kind of the format of the jQuery event is we've got some HTML target, and this can be all sorts of things in here. It could be a list, could be it could be a CSS selector, whatever. Dot, and then this line here is either an event or an effect. And this one, fade out, we're used to that one, is fade out. Um, it actually, whatever happens here, that when this command is executed, the HTML target, will fade out. So in here, I'm going to talk about that later. In my sample code, I'll show you what I've got. I've got, in this one, this dot fade out, and the first parameter is the number of milliseconds. So this is going to be 5 seconds. And then the second thing is actually a function, and I'll mention this in a moment. But remember, you don't even have to have anything in there if you didn't want to. I'll put this back in a moment. But even if I had that blank like that, and I'm going to save that and run it. No, I can't run it. I need to run the HTML. HTML has only an image of a bed and a div that's got some styling in the CSS, not much. And I'm going to launch that. Okay, and if I double click on it, it's going to fade out. Right? And that's kind of the default. I didn't have to put any parameters in there. Whoops. But when I did, what I did have is I had the number of seconds and then a call to what to do after the fade out is done. And the now do this is up here. It's just a function that's some JavaScript from grade 11. It's going to prompt you for a number, parse it into an integer, then this square equals num times num. That's going to actually just calculate the number times itself. And then another jQuery effect that we saw is how to append something. So it's going to append a point or a paragraph that has your answer is, and then the square calculated, and then another message there, you're welcome. And remember, there's our HTML tag. So it's actually going to append this command to the body of the HTML when that runs. So I'm going to save that and show you that that actually works. Reload it. So double click. There's the alert. It says give me a number. I type it in. It says your answer is 3136. You're welcome. And then notice that it faded out. It took 5 seconds for it to fade out, but it eventually did. And remember, if you want to know what the parameters are, if you in this case, here's the note. I'll tell you what these parameters are. Remember, speed can be a word like fast or slowly, or what I've done is I use the number of milliseconds. In any of these fade out or slide downs or whatever, when you have a speed as one of the parameters, that's the case, that it can be a number or a word like fast or slow, or I don't maybe there's a, is it normal is maybe in between fast and slow. I'm not sure. You'll have to look that up. And now do this was, and it doesn't have to be called now do this. It could be any function that you had. That's just regular JavaScript. JavaScript. And Code Academy, remember, in jQuery, it embeds the function. It doesn't assume that you know any JavaScript, so it would have done something like, well, like it does up here, right? So we have, instead of now do this, it would have function and then whatever you're doing inside the next set of curly brackets, okay? Where instead of just now do this, this is a whole bunch of commands, and that's how they embed it. And it quite honestly, it looks confusing when they embed too much. So I use now do this. There's my function now do this. So all that makes sense, I think. Back to the note. There's some things I want to talk about. So show different parameters, fast or 2500. So that just to show you that it doesn't matter, that I could put the word fast in there and then save that. That works still. See, it was quick that time, fast. I had 5,000 in there before, which made it fade out over a 5-second period. Function embedding, I showed you that already. Where do, if we're not sure about the parameters, like we know we would like it to fade out, but we're not sure what our options are. Like for instance, we never saw this second thing until the, that we could have a function being run after it fades out until the fourth jQuery lesson. How are we supposed to know what options are open to us? Well, remember, I do have my Edmodo open. I remember on the folders jQuery, I put a bunch of cheat sheets up here. So the cheat sheets on this cheat sheet somewhere should be, I'll take a second to load here, my computer's kind of slow, all these selectors and events. So events we have somewhere, core UI effect, we have a fade out. And it has speed and callback. So fade out, speed, and callback. Callback is the function that gets run once the fading out is done. Callback. Good. And we saw the fade to in the last lesson. Excellent. I want to mention that you're good Googlers. All you would have to do is put in some sort of appropriate search, jQuery fade out, and find something good. I think the first one up, this one right here, the API jQuery.com, is the official jQuery site, official jQuery documentation, and it's got all of the different options. So fade out, duration, what to do when you're complete. It's got some examples here, very, very long description. All right, slow, there's some examples. And you can see the sample code about what's going on. So this site is excellent. Lots of places to go in case you're not sure about what to type inside the brackets. Okay, so I reminded you about the Edmodo cheat sheets. Excellent. The double click and hover are two more events to trigger a jQuery effect. So we had in our sample code before, right? We've seen click. This one actually used double click. Right? The fade out, remember, if I didn't have my event trigger for the fade out effect, if I didn't have this, it would do that right away. And in fact, it would fade out, start fading out right away. I would never even actually see that the div, that red square was there. Usually I like to have some sort of event, like a double click, or like it says back in the note, a hover. Okay. Um, we've already seen click and mouse over in previous lessons. The next example I'm going to do is actually with the hover. So I'm going to open the second example. File, open, and where's my second example? Right there. I got to change my HTML, remember, so it has a link to the correct JavaScript. Save that. And this JavaScript actually has a hover in it. And so if I just read the code before something happens, I'm going to have an image. That's my picture of the bed. And when I hover over the first function, the first function is what happens when I first hover over. So it's actually running this function that I wrote called bed goes up. And I just wrote that. It has nothing to do with anything. And then the second part, the second function, is what happens when you leave whatever you're hovering over. Whenever I leave the image, it's going to run the second thing. Bed goes down. And this one actually has some animation in it, which is super cool. But let's get back to the note so you can see that. So here's where the double click thing is. Notice that in my first example, the double click triggered the fade out, right? This event, double click, triggered the effect fade out. And they don't have to match, right? Remember, this target could actually affect something else. In our early lessons, we had buttons erasing pictures and so on. So just like there's a double hit click, there's a hover. And in fact, when I'm got the mouse over something like this, that's what it means to hover. So right now I'm hovering over the word hover, and then when I release, then I'm not hovering anymore. It'll actually run that second thing. And we'll see that example once. Here's the example. So point at something, dot hover, and then the first function is when I start hovering, and the second function is when I stop hovering, when I leave. And the one event hover actually combines two different things. We saw, I think earlier or in the Code Academy, mouse enter is kind of like the start hover, and mouse leave is the end hover. But we can combine those into one thing, and it actually makes some pretty cool effects when we combine them with the animate. And I think I'm going to get to animate in part 2.